Are you an athlete who feels like you can't get any momentum with your training because you get injured, you take time off, you come back to competition again with rehab or without, you compete for a while, feeling pretty good, and then suddenly you get injured again, and you're just going through this frustrating process over and over again? Most injuries that you suffer, especially recurring injuries that you suffer on repeat, they're not bad luck. They're usually predictable and they're preventable once you understand why they're happening. If you're an athlete who keeps getting injured doing the sport that you love, then this video is going to help you understand why that might be happening and what you can do about it. All right, we're going to get straight into point number one. So this is your total training load is too high. Your body can only take so much stress before it starts to break down, and usually the weakest link is going to go first. So if you're someone who has repeated calf strains or repeated hammy strains or a repeated shoulder niggle that comes and goes, it's probably because your training stress is outpacing your ability to recover. Most people, when they train, they look at each individual training session and they're like, yep, I'll get through that, no dramas. But you fail to think about the accumulated fatigue that costs over time. So how is these training sessions linking together across the course of a week, across the course of a month? Is there any built-in recovery period there if necessary? And if there's not, are each of those sessions low enough so that you can fully recover from it before hitting the next one? Or can you hit a group of training sessions, fully recover from them, again, before you go again? So you need to have planned recovery periods as well as planned hard training periods. Because here's the thing, your tissues need time to recover from training. Tissues need time to rebuild, they need time to get stronger, and they need time to adapt to the loading and to tolerate more work. And this process often takes a lot longer than you want it to. So you need to give it that time that it needs to build, so then that you can continue to gradually build the training load over more likely a period of years rather than just a few weeks. Point number two, this is going to build off point number one, and this is that you're progressing way too fast. So it's a similar training load concept here, but they often act whilst together deep down. On the surface, they're a couple of different things. So you're progressing way too quickly in the sense that you do a certain amount of work, and then the next week you're going to add a certain amount of workload to what you're currently doing. And this is a problem because usually adding load week to week, you can see how that can jump up very quickly. But if you keep it the same for a little while, then slowly let your body's tolerance raise up to meet where your training is at, and then you start to add training load, you're going to have a much better time. Progression is going to be over a much longer period of time rather than just progressing every single week. But if you look at it more like, okay, maybe I'll do this much work based off all the objective data that I have or the baseline that I'm at, I'm going to hold it there until my recovery markers are coming up. And then once you hit that and you're feeling really good consistently, your objective measures are really good and your performance is going well, then you can start to increase a little bit more. And the usual principle that I have with this kind of thing is that how you feel doesn't dictate what your body is willing to tolerate. You can feel great, but in the course of one training session, you can feel rubbish for a few days after that. And a really good example of this is the delayed onset of muscle soreness, so DOMS. Everyone's experienced that at some point in their lives if they are someone who trains hard. And you're going to know that perhaps the next day you're a little bit sore. 2 days later is usually when it hits you the worst, and you're still feeling it 3 and potentially 4 and 5 days after if you've gone really, really hard. So that is the typical case of you just pushing it way too quickly and then coming down for the next 4 to 5 days to have to recover from that. And that can often happen in other tissues as well, not just muscle soreness, but the other tissues you don't tend to feel it like that as much. So if you are pushing hard day after day after day, remind yourself that, hey, maybe my tendons, maybe my bones, maybe my ligaments need a little bit more time to adapt to this, and I should just keep my training load consistent for a while, and then when perhaps performance starts to come down a little bit, either through too high fatigue or you've adapted to that stress, then you can reevaluate where you're at. You don't need to be progressing every single time. Reason number 3 that you are injured all the time is that you're not accounting for the stress of each individual training session, how that accumulates across the course of a week or a month. The thing with training is that fatigue is accumulative. It's not just you train one day, then you sleep overnight, you get up the next day and you're brand new, battery, fresh, ready to go. These things accumulate over time. So if, for example, you go to the gym, you're going to do some heavy calf raises today because you want to work on either getting some more jacked calves or you want to work on building up the calf and the Achilles tendon. Then the next day you've got yourself prescribed a fast sprint session. There's every chance you could pull a calf after that. That is a clear example of how fatigue from one session can interfere with another session. So doing heavy calf raises one day is not necessarily a bad thing if you can recover from it before going into that next sprint session. But if you're still fatigued from doing heavy calf raises either the day before or the 2 days before or even the 3 days before if you pushed it really hard, even longer than that if you pushed it super hard, then pushing that fatigue going into that sprint session is going to leave you at risk if you haven't taken the appropriate time to recover from that, or if you haven't controlled the stress on that previous session before pushing into the next one. Reason number 4 you're injured all the time is that you're ignoring warning signs. Your body is not going to give you grief for no reason. If you have a knee that's niggling away at you and it doesn't settle down and it continues to niggle at the same level or slowly increase, you need to start paying attention to that. Yes, sometimes things will get sore and achy and then they'll settle down and you can carry on as per normal. But if they don't settle, that is a warning sign that, hey, maybe I need to pay attention to this and start adjusting my training load and giving that knee or whatever it is a little bit of love so that it can settle and allow me to push into training hard again. The thing about these little niggles that start off small and you ignore them is if you do get onto them early, so you be proactive, then they don't become this big setback that sets you back 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months sort of thing. If you're gonna leave them and just hope that it gets better, that's when it will become that really long rehab process and you're gonna get frustrated and either quit or just push on through because you wanna just ignore it and it won't matter. The thing about this is that hope is not a recovery strategy. You need to be proactive with getting on top of these things early. Number 5, you're not accounting for stress outside of training. A lot of the patients I see in the clinic that come to me with injuries, whether it be acute or like a chronic type of injury, they come in and then we talk about all of the things that are going on in their lives. And as often that they pick up themselves as like, oh, I actually have a lot going on outside of training. Maybe if I try and get on top of that, things will start to settle down a little bit. And once you do start to see this, you can see how training on its own is not just the only stressor in your life. Unless you're like 18, 19, 20 years old, maybe you're a uni student, maybe you're not. But if you're someone who works a full-time job, has a family, trains hard and has a social life, all of these things are going to impact your total system stress levels because your nervous system does not distinguish between training stress and work stress and the stress of having kids and all of those other things that are happening outside of training. To your body, it's all the same thing. If you're having a tough week at work or you've got a busy month coming up because there's deadlines and you've got to get the work done so that you can meet those expectations, maybe training just needs to go on the back burner for that period of time and you need to be proactive about that. If you're going to try and keep training the same or even push it harder, maybe something will flare up or maybe an injury will creep in and that's only going to frustrate you and affect your ability to work anyway. The people who stay healthy long term are the ones who take proactive decisions with their training because their life is telling them that it needs to. The athletes who stay healthy long term are the ones that take proactive action based off their life around them because you cannot control every single variable that goes on. But if you try and stay in control of the ones that you can control, and often that's going to be the training stress that you're providing to your system, then you're going to be better off and you're going to have a longer time and a happier time doing what you want to do. And the way I look at all this, I'm going to probably make another video on this at some point, but is if you take a bucket, right, and you've got all of these stresses filling up your bucket, so the bucket is you, it's your system, all of these stresses are filling up the bucket. That's work stress, social stress, family, you've got training in there as well. And then on the bottom of that bucket, you got a tap, and you want to turn that tap on to empty the bucket out. They're your recovery modalities. So that's going to be things like good sleep and good nutrition, etc. So when you're filling that bucket up, you need to be able to turn that tap on to empty it out. The bucket can only get so full. So once you start to see that analogy in action, you can understand the full picture as to how all of these stresses can play a role in how much your body is willing to take before it breaks down. Being injured all the time is not a character flaw. It's not an injury-prone genetic disposition, and it's definitely not bad luck. It's usually a solvable problem of just managing your stress, your training loads. If you can get those in control, then everything is probably going to be okay. Yes, sometimes you do suffer from bad luck, but often it's going to come down to planning and execution of that plan over time and not trying to rush the process. And if you do want to learn more about how you can build a body that's not going to break down on you, you can click on this video right here where I will outline everything that you need to know about that.